Chicago had gangsters of every hue. And I felt, wouldn't it be great to relive the pulps of the American 1930s, where you had the Spider, the Shadow, characters who in a pre-comics world, would beat the crap out of the bad guys. So I, at the end of the 1970s, brought back the pre-comics era of the early 1930s with a character called Night Raven, who would brand villains. He had a brand on his hand, and he would, on people's foreheads, he would brand them if he caught them and they were bad guys. He didn't take prisoners. He really didn't. And then he would leave them a little note, not so much for them as the police, that would say, "Where brooding darkness spreads its evil wings, the night raven stings." Because I thought that sounds a bit classical. It's stolen from Milton, from Allegro, but it doesn't matter. It sounds good. And the thing about comics is you need to add a touch of class to them. I think Green Lantern's oath, "In brightest day, in darkest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light." Fab! Brilliant! I mean, that's the kind of thing kids root for. They want to go into the playground and say it and not get beaten up. So I brought that back with Night Raven. But the interesting thing about Night Raven, other than the fact that Stan Lee hated it, because Stan said, "Gee, Dez, why do you want to set something in the 1930s? And I said, because nobody else has set anything in the 1930s, Stan. And you don't need to create supervillains. You've got tongs, gangsters, rum runners. You've got everything you need is already in place. It worked for Elliot Ness. It can work for Night Raven." And he said, "Gee, Dez, couldn't he be in Manhattan now?" And I said, with as straight a face as I could manage, "Don't worry, Stan, I've got this little idea in mind that we can bring him into Manhattan in the 70s if we have to." And he said, "Great," left me to it, never did it. I carried on with what I wanted to do. But what was interesting was the artist I chose to draw Night Raven, a guy called David Lloyd, came up with this really good sort of classical shaped chest emblem, because after all comics characters have to have chest emblems. And it was a symbolic looking raven, which was basically a V shape in a circle. The character had a total face mask, so you couldn't see what he looked like, and wore a fedora, and was so enigmatic it was untrue, because in one episode, and this is the beauty of comics, what happens between the frames, we had a cop catch Night Raven, because he's up against the law, the villains, he's up against everybody. A cop catches him, and in one frame he's got he's handcuffed. And in the next frame, the cop's wearing the handcuffs. We never explained how he did it. We didn't need to. It happened between frames. It's a lovely trick you can do with comics.